Greetings and salutations, everyone. You know, it's been a hot minute since I've gone over what races in Warcraft that I want to see playable someday, and there's quite the hefty amount, even in our glorious year of 2025. And I mean a lot. So, let's let our voices be known and scream at Blizzard on these races that we're all mostly itching for. Mostly. Or at least what I'm itching for. You know what I want, and I ain't subtle. Gimme them Mok'Nathal already. And yeah, disclaimer I guess, these are specifically the races that I want. I'm more than sure you will all let me know what you guys want in your own videos and your own comments, but yeah, this is my list. This is what I want. But without further delay, here are 12 races, in no particular order, mostly, that I am hoping to be playable someday. Let's go! The ancient giants from Draenor, the Ogres, once lorded over the Orcs' homeworld with an iron fist, and were one of the big powerhouses of the planet that, like many of the Breakers, derived from the Titan-made Colossus, Grond. Magically more imbued than their successors the Orcs, they even had a rare mutation of growing 2 heads, further enhancing their minds and magical skills, which was later in time further pressed and created by the Orc Warlock, Gul'dan, in a great number than before. Despite their skills with magic and having an impressive empire, the Ogres lost their hold on the planet and were no longer the dominant race of Draenor. And as the Orcs grew in power, together united the Horde. So too, the Ogres would be recruited in their ranks. But it would not last forever, leaving the Horde after the events of the Second War to find their own place throughout the world of Azeroth. The Stonemaul Ogres being the exception, as they were recruited later on into the Horde by Rexxar, when Orgrimmar and most of Kalimdor was under threat from Dalen Proudmoore. The Ogres have remained an on-and-off race within the Horde since. Suffice to say, the Ogres have been sought after within the Horde for some time, and their 2-headed option would make a quite unique addition. So let's finally see them within the Horde. The Savage Conquerors, once among the greatest of the Titanforge races, now known as the Vrykul. They were humanity's predecessors, and were among the Titans' most fond foot soldiers. So much so that even death wouldn't stop them forever, as their many gods would raise them again for their various causes, either through Odin, Halia, or even the Lich King. But when the Curse of Flesh infected them, they were no longer as tempered by the Titans' edicts, and quickly resulted in the way of the Viking. Spreading out throughout the land and sea, they were most known within the continents of Stormheim and Northrend. The Vrykul currently owe no allegiance to either the Alliance or the Horde, putting them in an interesting situation where they could perhaps serve both at some point, though there is increasing reason for them to maybe join with their now successors in the humans, who were their, or rather are, their corrupted offsprings. Plus, there is the additional matter of what Sylvanas attempted to do to them within Stormheim, further pushing them maybe closer to the Alliance's doors. A renowned and ancient empire of the snake-like race derived from the ancient wild god Enloa, Sethrak, a god who fell in a great battle against a powerful Cathraxi. The Sethrak grew their army and culture within the sands of Uldun, following the death of their god. Since then, they've had a difficult growth with Separalis's demise, resulting in a splinter of their own unity, and resulting in the Faithless, whom attempted a war with the Zandalari and any who would cross their paths. Fortunately, the Faithless were ultimately dealt with, along with their insidious allies. In the wake of their defeat, Sethrak was reborn. The Sethrak have made many allies in the Horde, Volpera, and even in the Zandalari, when they were at their greatest of perils. and it would make a great sense for them to join the ranks of the mighty Horde. The aquatic, wise, and well-versatile fish-like Jinyu people, they were once simple murlocs who would happen upon the sacred waters from the Vale of Eternal Blossoms in Pandaria, evolving into an entirely new culture and race thereafter. Their skill set of looking within the waters for clarity and even the future were legendary and often were used in the service to the emperors of Pandaria. Their Enkoan trimes found within the deep waters around the world, namely Coast of Nazjar, were also skilled in their unique swordsmanship. Given their past alliances with the Alliance faction that helped them in their efforts in both Pandaria and Nazjar, it would make obvious sense that they would officially join the ranks completely. The mysterious underwater dwellers and scavengers across Azeroth's seas, the Gilgoblins are an enigma of a race in their origins, either being created by goblin scientists in alchemy, or something else entirely. It remains unknown of their true origins, only that they've made the seas their home for quite some time now. Despite this, the Gilgoblins hold many similarities but also differences to their goblin kin, namely in their enjoyment of treasures. In the conflict against Ajara and the Naga within Nazjar, the Horde aided the Gilgoblins and their other allies in freedom and fight against those who would oppress them in the sea and land of that area. They're seen on the shores of Durotar after the threats of Nazjar were mostly dealt with. This would of course give further reasoning for them to at long last join the ranks of the Horde that assisted them. The imperialistic sea serpents found within the deep sea all around Azeroth's oceans, shores, and other various locations, they were once highborn elves ever loyal to their queen, Ajara. But when their font of power, the Well of Eternity, caused the very sundering around the world, shattering it, they were dragged into the dark ocean's dark depths, where they would be changed forever. In a final attempt to ward off death from crushing her and her people, Ajara made a deal with the old god N'Zoth, who saved them by morphing them all into Naga that we know today. Her people remaining still loyal to her in life and making an entirely new empire beneath the waves, built in her favor, where they've created many enemies and been a constant foe ever since. Their own allegiances are still mostly with their queen, but occasionally allying with the likes of the Blood Elves, Illidan, and even the Illidari. While they have mostly clashed with everyone, it's not out of the possibility that they could form an alliance with the Horde and the Alliance under the right circumstances. The vicious avian race, known as the Arakkoa, were once one of Draenor's rival races that were ever dominant on the planet's skies and also its surface. They were created by Rukmar, who used her own energies to create this new species to pay tribute to Anzu's great sacrifice in the defeat of the corrupted wild god, Seth. While their empire was vast, impressive, and advanced, it, much like what they were created from and for, was not devoid of corruption, both in flesh and in the mind, as the Arakkoa society would begin to cast down its very own in the corrupted pools of Seth's blood, shaping them into a new form of Arakkoa that were without flight and more reliant on the shadows compared to their siblings above, harnessing the light. They were now known as the Outcasts. This divide eventually costed them, as their great empire would wage war on itself and eventually fall under the tide that was the united Orcish clans of the Horde. Their once great world and people forever broken and scattered. With what the Horde eventually did to the Arakkoa and their own world, it is my own belief that they would settle within the ranks of the Alliance. However, it is possible that should their peoples remain broken, It's possible that both the Outcasts and the High Arakkoa, if they had survived, would separately remain bitter rivals on their new home of Azeroth, with the Outcasts in the Horde and the High Arakkoa perhaps within the Alliance. Ultimately though, it would appear most of the High Arakkoa were wiped out, so I still believe that they would remain on their current path fully within the Alliance, given the Horde's past betrayals and past deeds. The bruteful tyrants in Pandaria were among Ra-Den's High Guard, created by the Titan Keeper to keep the land of Pandaria safe from those who would do it harm, namely in the Mantid and the Shah. But when Ra-Den gave in to despair, the Mogu came under the effects of the Curse of Flesh. Protection was no longer their desire, but their new desire was power and control. The Mogu clans and eventually Empire soon became the conquerors over the land that they were meant to keep safe, and enslaved the denizens of that land. They abused their newfound powers under the command of their many kings and many emperors, mainly under their new emperor and first emperor, the Thunder King. However, with time, their slaves revolted and took back their freedom by force from the Mogu, ending the reign that the Mogu had over the Pandaren forevermore, with only a few attempting to regain a spark that was never to be found again. The Mogu were extremely hostile, but did hold an alliance with the Zandalari briefly, even if that doesn't appear to last anymore with the demise of Prophet Zul. There are Mogu in the Rajani who have returned to their original purpose by Ra-Den, who worked instead to keep Pandaria safe from the Mantid and other threats, making redemption not an impossibility for the Mogu as a whole. And perhaps such Mogu with a greater purpose would be more willing to work within the ranks of the Alliance and the Horde. The most jolly, wholesome, but most endurant race of the Tuskarr are a walrus-like people who have a great appreciation for fishing, soup, turtles, stories, traveling, and the sea. Despite their nature, they've shared many conflicts with the Kavoldir, Wolvar, Gnolls, and other such neighbors. Despite this, they've remained strong and prominent in most dangerous of locations, housed by the Undead Scourge in Northrend and the Dragon Isles, where the many dragons of sorts had called home. They've offered aid to both the Alliance and Horde in the past, and have mainly been neutral whenever the two factions have emerged near their villages. However, that doesn't mean the Tuskarr people wouldn't join in either ranks, I believe. And with the right situation, I believe that the Tuskarr could join in either the Alliance and also the Horde. The ever-influential traitors, scholars, assassins, and, well, all kinds of ethereal people, were a people that once opposed Dimensius with their magical skill and technology. Unfortunately, their fight against the Void resulted in them losing their physical form, and seemingly losing most of their planet as a result. Forced to wear bandages to cover themselves, they soon became all kinds of cartels that did trade with those across the cosmos, within the Great Dark Beyond. While many would become our enemies, either for their own goals, or for themselves, or for the Void, the many ethereal cartels have aided the Horde and the Alliance prior, and can do so again within both of their ranks. And with the voyage to Koresh seemingly upcoming now, would be a great time for an alliance to be formed between the two factions and the ethereal peoples. The ever-broken yet long-standing Krokul people of the Draenei, also known as the Broken Draenei, were survivors of Fel inflicted by either the Burning Legion or their agents, on either Outland or Argus. Losing their connection to the light, they resulted in other methods not to be crushed by demons who hounded them down, either through the elements, shadows, or other means. They would simply endure. On Outlands, the Broken survived under Akama, whom briefly forged an alliance with the demon hunter Illidan, but as betrayers do, Illidan's agenda seemed to only cost Akama and his people, forcing him to free Outland from Illidan's reign and take back his home of Karabor. many of the broken either stayed on Outland or joined their brethren on the crashed ship of the Exodar, where the Draenei called home on Azeroth. Meanwhile, Hatun led the broken Draenei on Argus, and had his own people survive the very gates of the world the Legion ultimately called home, left behind by Velen on Argus, while Velen escaped the Burning Legion. Recently, he has brought his people to Azeroth, where Velen and many of the other Draenei have called home within the ranks of the Alliance. And interest has been placed to perhaps remain here to give his people a better life and perhaps even one for himself. Especially with a new city about to be made for all of their people. The strong survivalist of Outland and Draenor, the Mok'Nathal are half-orc and half-ogres created by the Ogre Empire to be strong combatants with the strength of an ogre but the mind of an orc. The ogres, however, did not have full reign over the Mok'Nathal though, and ultimately the Mok'Nathal earned their freedom through blood and battle. Following their freedom from the ogres, the Mok'Nathal clan mostly wanted an isolated life within the wilds with their beasts and wanted to live out the rest of their days bereft of conflict, living within what could be now known as the Blade Edge Mountains, or what it was previously called Gorgrond, under Leorox's leadership. However, when the Orcish horde began to form, Leorox's only son, Rexxar, left and ensured his own people's safety from Blackhand's wrath by joining the horde's ranks, though this was seen as rites for banishment for Rexxar by his father. Rexxar would then be exiled from his own clan, as the Mok'Nathal would have no part in the bloodbath that the horde was spreading. Years later, the Mok'Nathal, though, would remain alive and active in spite of it all, in spite of a broken world, and within time would be given aid by the Horde and eventually even invited to the first ever Kosh'Harg on Azeroth, an invitation never sent their way before due to their half-blooded origins. With the Horde change and Outland further falling apart and the Orc clans expressing its own open hand to the Mok'Nathal, it remains quite clear that the Mok'Nathal have been offered a place not only on Azeroth, but on the Horde itself. At long last, this could also lead to Rexxar finally leading the clan that once exiled him. Well, you knew what the last one probably was. I left a hint at the beginning, so yeah. And I'm forever hoping that it and every single race on here happens in some capacity. Yeah, some of them are going to be harder than others to make, I realize that, but these are simply the races that I really wish to see happen, and I would like to play someday, either as customization, allied, or just a full-blown race that we used to get. But what about all you, my lore horde? What are some races that you want to see playable someday? You know mine, so I want to hear yours. And if you also want Mok'Nathal, as I've been asking for years now, you're awesome. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to hear more from me and my community, feel free to join us in our Discord, or if you like me enough, please support me on my Patreon like these amazing folks here. You can also hit that join button too. All helps in keeping this channel alive and well. But until next time, my friends, see ya!